Hello, my loyal listeners. Thanks so much for supporting the podcast. This experiment is turning into a much bigger success than I could have imagined. That's thanks to you. So please keep on subscribing and sharing. My goal is 1,000 downloads by Remembrance Day. Since this podcast is actually getting downloaded, guess what? Businesses actually want to pay me to advertise for them. Who would have thought? So I'm proud to be sponsored by Boris, who happens to be a great buddy of mine and an up-and-coming jiu-jitsu champ, and his company, Be Air. If you live in or around the West Island of Montreal and your house felt like a Russian sauna last year, give him a call. Boris will hook you up with the best AC unit, all professionally installed and done with the highest level of customer care on the market today. That's no bullshit either. He's installed at my house. Check him out on Facebook at Be Air. That's capital B, period, Air, A-I-R. Or go to his website at www.montrealfurnacefilters.com. He's also a proud Army veteran and brings that work ethic and pride to work every day and refuses to let any of his clients down. I'm also honored to be sponsored by the best real estate agent on the market, Stéphane Leroux. You've got a house that needs to be sold? Get a hold of Steve. I can assure you, because he's my agent as well, he goes the extra mile. Every time I see a post from him, he's getting over 100% of the seller's asking price. That's crazy. If you're in the Montreal area, give this guy a call, and you can head to his website, www.stephaneleroux.com. That's Stephan Leroux, Leroux.com, and book an appointment. Did I mention he's also a decorated member of the Canadian Armed Forces? He knows exactly the needs and concerns of our community when getting posted. So make sure to give him a shout. So get out there and support your veteran-owned businesses. What happens when someone tells you that he or she is going to get something done but doesn't? This person comes up with excuses. It isn't always malicious or even purposeful. Often they are the reasons and excuses that the person has sold himself or herself to make it all acceptable. The individual creates excuses so he or she can continue living with himself or herself and not allow his or her failure to weigh on him or her. What happens after the person has bought his or her own excuses? He or she tries to sell them to you and others around him or her. This is an excerpt from Chapter 2 of Steve Karagioules' book, The Heart of a Champion, 5 Easy Principles for Success and Happiness. Steve's book lays out the path, backed by loads of research on what separates those that succeed and those that don't, and how to define success for yourself in 5 simple heartbeats that will help you go further than ever before. Let's welcome Steve Karagioules to the show.
Welcome to the Hard to Kill podcast, the go-to podcast for military, LEO, and EMS professionals, sharing ideas and experiences from around the world to make you hard to kill. Here's your host, Dave Morrow.
All right, welcome everybody to the Hard to Kill podcast. On today's show, we have Steve Karagioules. Steve, did I get that right?
You did.
Oh, nice. Sweet. Okay. So he's the author of Heart of a Champion. He's a Spartan racer, husband, and father of 2 lovely girls. He was a member of the Cadet Corps and was part of a privileged few to graduate from his jump course in 1995. Currently, Steve is hosting seminars on mindset and personal development, which emphasize the value of hard work. Steve, what's going on, brother?
It's going well. It's going very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. So basically, me and Steve were introduced by a mutual friend, Tim, who was like, Dave, you're writing a book? Dude, he's like, you should talk to my buddy, Steve. And so through Facebook, we got a hold of each other. And so then I shot him a message, and because I wanted to know the process of basically what it was to write a book, because I was writing my book, The Nimble Warrior, and which is out now. So the shameless plug there. And so Steve was in the process of publishing this book, and he had it ready, and it was all about mindset. And I was like, dude, I got to talk to this guy. So Steve, how about we start with just how your book came to be and what is your book all about?
How it came to be. It's funny because it's a long disjointed process. You mentioned that I did my jump course in 95, and it's a few years ago, sitting at home, I was bored of going to the gym, and I decided to sign up for a 15K Spartan race. And my mentality was, I'm gonna do a tough one so that I know I got to work for it. And then just the process of, the motivation that I developed in my training that wasn't there before that, and getting ready for the race, and then the years since of doing the races, I've developed an appreciation for hard training. I guess the obstacle, and the obstacle is the way. There's a book called that, and I definitely lived and learned that mindset. And then going through it, I saw how harder training, making, the average person might say, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." I was pushing myself to get past that. And then I was asked one day to do a speech in front of a group of franchisees. And instead of just getting up and doing something blasé, I wanted to give them motivation. This was a group that was performing well, but it was starting to rest on its laurels. And I decided to start researching what was the difference between the average person and the stars of our society, or the high achievers. And I found 5 principles, and I delivered that speech. It was really well received. I got invited out to the UK to deliver the same speech. And that's when I got the idea to write the book and put the principles into an easy to read. I'm talking about doing things difficult, but I know that reading is one of those difficult things that a lot of people just don't do. So I made it an easy book, simple, because it really is simple. I believe if you want to have success in your life, it is a simple process, or at least simple steps. It's simple, but if it were easy, everybody would do it. And that's kind of how the book came to be. And the book is about 5 steps that it takes to achieve success. And, I have to say, success is not just about the bank account. I think in society today, we talk a lot about money, money, money. Success is really feeling good in your skin. So it's about, what do you do to achieve that success? What do you do to achieve that level of happiness in your life? And like I said, it's an easy read. So it's something that puts it into the most basic of terms, or the easiest way to comprehend and apply it in your life.
Roger that, man. I've read the book, and you mentioned a lot of awesome stuff that only in the last few months I've kind of come across. Like the one that sticks out is kind of like the 10,000 hour rule. And when I was going along this path, because I was teaching right before this, I was teaching for about 6 years, and I was obviously in the Army as well. This whole mindset stuff was never really something that I read about. And I have a science background. And so when I started going down that path of like what makes somebody successful, I started reading a few books. One of them was actually the Sports Gene, which was kind of an offshoot of the 10,000 hour principle. And he goes into that in depth. And I love that 10,000 hour principle where it's like, yeah, you can have talent, but like at the end of the day, you need to put the hard work in. I love that. And I was like, shit, I'm like, that's badass. But so much of the stuff that you mentioned here is stuff that I've been hearing over and over and over again, because I listen to a lot of podcasts, but also I listen to a lot of YouTube channels. So a lot of guys like, Jocko Willink, Jordan Peterson, like it's like the same message gets repeated over and over. And it's kind of turns into like a mantra, right? It's like, okay, there's a few core things that end up making you relatively successful, or a champion in your case. So what are kind of like, what are the things that you went into that made it, like, what was so obvious to you that you're like, okay, I got to write a book about that, or do your talk? Like, what were the ones that were just like, boom, these are the ones that stood out?
So I've worked in management, and I've worked in human resources for a long time. And I've seen that some of the things that jumped out, a lot of the things that limit people are their belief in themselves. And even before that, they get started, and whether it be at work or at the gym or really anywhere, a lot of people get started on a path. You see it in January 1st, they've got resolutions, and then before long, they fall off. And so I actually worked it backwards, looking at, well, why do people fail? And when you look at why people fail, and then you compare that with why people succeed, you see that they're the same, or it's the same reason, except these people do it and these people don't. And so I broke it down. One of the things is you have to know your why. Why are you doing, or why are you about to sacrifice your time, your effort, your comfort to attain what you want to attain? If you don't know it, or if you think you know it, a lot of times people say, well, I want to do this because, I want to save money. And that's a very easy motivator, but money is actually not a motivator. Money is a hygiene factor. It's something that helps keep you alive, helps keep you healthy, but doesn't keep you alive for real. So what is money going to buy you? And so in the book, I talk about the 5 whys, and it's drilling down to find out what is your core value here? What is the core reason you're going to do it? Because if it's not hard, it's not going to be worth it. So real goals are going to be difficult to achieve. And when it gets difficult, it's like a path. We always talk about success in the journey and so on. But if you think about it as a path, when it gets hard, it's as if you don't have light. And your why is the fuel that keeps your fire burning, so that you're able to continue on that path even when it does get dark. And it'll get dark whether it be from your doubts, your fears, or criticism, or even failure. You may fail along your way and may want to quit, but if you've got that solid why, and often when people fail, it's because they don't have that motivator. But when you do have it, you're going to pick yourself back up again and continue going.
That's solid. I don't know if it was Nietzsche. I'm trying to pull out from what I learned from university, but he said something like, maybe you probably heard this quote, but if you know your why, you can endure anyhow. I think it was Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right? Sure. Let's say sure. The listeners can be like, yeah, I was in Nietzsche. Okay. But
to your point, it's a message that whether it be in my book or in a bunch of other books, it is a common message, because it is so simple. You have to know your reason why, and your why has to be bigger than the reason why not. Just like when you look at change, often people don't change until the pain of not changing hurts more than the pain of changing. Well, so motivation has a lot to do with pain avoidance. And so why is the same thing. Achieving your why has to hurt less than not. And when you have that why and it's big enough, well, you're going to go for it. And the pain that you're going to achieve along the way. And if we look at, I like to use exercise as a good example, since it's probably the most palpable example. It hurts to train. It hurts, if you're doing CrossFit or you're doing push-ups or you're running and you're trying to beat a time or whatever it is, it's going to hurt, but not doing it is going to hurt even more. Somebody wants to lose weight or wants to achieve a certain to win a race or whatever it is, that's going to hurt, but not doing it is going to hurt even more.
Yeah, Roger, that kind of like there's a mantra that I tell my clients a lot related to nutrition. It's pay the farm now. So like FARM, or pay the farm later. I'm sure you've heard it. It's right. It's in the CrossFit circles, like, or pay the farm later, which means like PHARM. So get your shit together now. Yeah, it costs a lot of money to eat well. But if you're not eating well now, guess what? Back end costs are going to be a lot more. And same goes for your body too. Actually, have you heard?
Exactly.
This is just something that I came across. Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a few times. She talked about something called a principle in science called hormeosis. Is it hormeosis or hormesis? Hormeosis. And essentially, it's you need to endure a little bit of stress and pain in order to elicit a positive change. And the most common example of that is exercise. Like if you, the difference between, and a lot of people are like, well, you exercise, you can exercise 7 days a week, or you can train 4 days a week. And, training is you have goalposts and like you said, you're training hard, like it's painful. Exercise, let's go for a walk with your wife. And
being active.
So I always have to kind of define those two things. When you're training, it means you got a goal, man. Like most people are like, oh, I can't exercise 7 days a week, because I think they see it as, oh, I have to be running a mile, like all out, and I don't have the ability to do that. It's honestly just a little bit of stress ends up producing such awesome back end effects. So tell me, man, what's a way that you can? Do you have a way that you can generate a why? Like, do you have some interesting ways to do it? You write them down? Like, what's your way of generating your why?
Yeah. So, and I covered in the book, and I actually helped a friend quit smoking by finding her true why.
Dude, you saved a life, man. That's huge.
Well, and her initial reason to quit was very superficial. It was, I'm going to save money, and it really wasn't thought out. And the exercise is just keep asking why. Why is it important to save money, or why is it important to be healthy? Because a lot of people say, oh, I want to be healthier. Well, that's, first of all, a horrible goal, because what does that mean? I mean, instead of smoking a pack a day, I'll smoke half a pack and I'm healthier, technically. So, right. So again, when the going gets tough, and if we look at somebody who's trying to quit smoking, the cravings kick in, that why's got to be really strong in order to continue. So we keep asking, well, why? Why is it important? Why do I want to have this? And it's to get to that core value, which, when we think of something like exercise or health, that bottom why often is going to be, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I mean, I don't want to die. I want to live for my kids. But we're not going to start by saying that. We're going to say, oh, I want to look better. Who cares? Really? When you get to a certain age, you're not going to be so motivated by what you look like.
Yeah. I'm well past, like, dad bod. Like, I look around, I'm like, I can still see my feet. I can still see my dick. I'm good, man. Like, I don't, what more do I need? Like, my wife isn't going to be like, oh, I wish you had 6-pack abs. No, she's like, did you get the groceries? Yes. Okay, cool. Like, whether I have 6-pack or not, that's irrelevant, Yeah.
Exactly. Can you tie your shoes? Can you do everything that you need to do in a day without exerting too much energy in order to accomplish it? Well, yes. Now, if you get the 6-pack and all that along the way, great. But that's the secondary. Your primary to training is going to be, I want to be healthy. I want to live long for my kids. I don't want to die young. Bang. And that's a strong, like I said, it's motivation is often grounded in fear. We all fear death to a certain extent, whether, some people know death is part of life and all that, but we still don't want to die. We want to be here as long as possible. So when we're looking at health, it's to drill down, well, what's your core motivator? And it often has to do with, I want to live longer. I don't want to be sick and in pain. Or, a lot of times people say, well, I saw this happen to a friend or a family member and they suffered, and I don't want that to happen to me. There's a fear there. And there's a core value, a core principle, a core motivator that is a lot deeper and stronger than that original, oh, I want to look good, or I want to look better, or I want to just be a little bit more in shape. That's fine. But when the going gets tough, that's going to get thrown out the window, and it's not going to motivate anymore.
Absolutely. It's so important. And, that's something that I've only recently started to do, like within the last few months, to, like you said, drill down and get to what your why is. And I came up with my why, and it was, I want to be able to go flat out sprint with my grandkids. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's like, if I can do a sprint, obviously I'm not going to be as fast as I am now, but if I can do a sprint and, like, drive the knees and drive the arms when I'm in my 70s, for me, that's my success. But that requires a shit ton of work. Like, now it's easy, mm-hmm. But 30 something plus years from now, 40 years from now, I'll be pushing 80. Am I really going to be able to do that if I just kind of take it easy? I don't think so. It's a whole series of things that I'm going to need to take care of, not just my body, but I'm also going to be like, have to eat well. I can't have metabolic disease. There's all these things that I want to be able to do, just because for me, that's what I love doing with my son right now, which is going out, and obviously he's not able to do full wind sprints. He's only 2 years old, but he will be. And I want to be there, and I want to be able to do all the sports that my father did with me as well. And that's super important to me, but that means there's a lot of things I need to put in place. And so
exactly
having that why is so important, because it kind of focuses me on literally everything else.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sacrifice required to get there. If the goal is to be long-term, 30, 40 years, you're going to need 30, 40 years of effort and sacrifice. You didn't mention sleep. Sleep is going to be one of those things that you need to commit to properly as well. And what's the easy path? Well, the easy path, or the comfort zone, is I'm going to sit on my couch versus going out to run. I like running when it rains, and I know a lot of people don't, and a lot of people say, oh, it's kind of cold. And I like it because I actually run better in the rain, but it's getting out there and saying, no, I'm not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to sit on my couch. I'm going to go do it despite it raining or despite it being cold or icy. I'm going out to train today. And again, I like going to exercise, but it's the same thing with reading. I could put on the TV and watch, I don't know, a lot of mindless stuff, but I'll pick up a book instead and read and learn. and grow. Those are the kind of sacrifices that when you have that bigger why, you're going to do it over the long term. You're going to absorb the pain in order to go for the bigger win.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so tell me a bit more. Like you said, you do Spartan races and stuff, and that's something that I started years ago. But I didn't do any last year. And I used to take, when I was a teacher, I used to take some of my students up as well. Like, tell me more. Like, it's not easy to do, and there's a lot of people that kind of, I think, take it on, and I've seen it. I'm sure you have too. They take it on, and I don't think they know what they're getting themselves into. So, what's kind of like, what do you do to get ready? Because I noticed a big change. I was a runner, and I would always just focus on the run, focus on the run, focus on the run. And then I changed my plan, and I basically just stopped running long distances and just increased my, I basically did a lot more CrossFit, and I just focused on leg strength, leg endurance, and it made a really big difference. So I'm just curious to know, like, what have you been doing in order to kind of get yourself ready for things like a Spartan race, which is no easy task?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I used to do focus on the run. That was my weakness when I started. I was not a runner. I'm a shorter, stocky guy, so running long distance running is kind
pure
of
power, pure
not my
power, man.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I always compare myself to the dwarf in the Lord of the Rings. My body's built for sprinting, not long distances. But yeah, so it's a lot of interval training. In the summer, there's a park 3.5 kilometers away from here, so I run over, and then once I'm there, I can do all the calisthenics. I do a lot of interval training there. I'll do whether it be an AMRAP or an EMOM while I'm there, and then I'll run back. So I'm working on my endurance for the longer races. And like you, where it used to be just running, now I focus a lot more through CrossFit on my leg strength and leg endurance, as well as upper body strength, the pull-ups, because of the rope and so on. Depending where you're going to do your race, obviously I do them mostly here in Quebec on the side of a mountain. Your leg strength and endurance is key because you're running up a mountain. When I did my beast in Quebec City last year.
Oh, you did the beast too? Yeah.
Yeah. I do the beast.
Yeah. After that one's like, I'm not doing these again. I'm done.
That's usually what I say for the day that I finish, and maybe a few days later, and then not long after, I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it again. Yeah. It's that little not so well part inside of my brain that makes me love the challenge. But when I did the beast in Quebec on Stoneham Mountain, we had to go up and down 6 or 7 times. So if your leg strength isn't there and your endurance isn't there, yeah, maybe you'll make it up once or twice. But when you start hitting the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time, and you're hitting, hour number 3, 4, 5, 6, you're cooked. So that's, leg strength and endurance are the two probably biggest things. Burpees. If you're not a fan of burpees, become a fan of burpees, because you've got to do 30 burpees whenever you miss an obstacle. Yeah. And burpees are the best full body exercise probably. So you might as well get used to them and get good at them.
Interesting fact about burpees, actually.
Yeah.
Apparently they're invented by the Canadian Air Force during the Second World War. Don't take my word. That's what I heard. That's what I read. It was a way to keep their airmen fit without having to go for runs. So we can, thank you. It's another national moment of pride, I guess. If we invented the burpee, we're gonna have to go and get some researchers on that one to confirm that one. But that's what I hear. That's what I hear. So you're welcome to all those people out there. We invented the burpee.
Yeah. I don't think we say you're welcome when you're in the middle of a 7-minute round of burpees, but
it's like, all right, 100 burpees at a time. You're like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. But burpees are definitely a great way to get going. When I first started training, it was winter and I didn't know what I needed to do. I just read that 30 burpees after every obstacle. So I would do a sprint on my elliptical of 5 minutes, and then I would do 30 burpees, and then get back on and do a 5-minute sprint, and then 30 burpees. That improved the cardio, improved the endurance, and it's still one of the exercises or the workouts that I do regularly is the sprint and burpees.
That sounds very, very painful. You definitely got a masochistic side in you. I'm surprised you didn't stay in the infantry long term. You would have been a major for sure, just beasting people. Like, I think that's in my head. That's why I stayed in the infantry. Like, you did your jump course really early on, and that was always the course. I really want that, because it was just it's hard. I want to do it, and I just always gravitated to that difficult shit. That my first LT, on course when they pulled you aside to see like you weren't cracking and like how you were doing, like
Mm-hmm.
he's like, yeah, so how you enjoying yourself there, Private? And I was like, I fucking love this shit. He's like, good, Masochists do really well here. And he's like, keep it up. I
Yeah.
was like, yep. I'm like, yeah, give me as much as you can. Like I'll take it. So that unlocked a part of my brain, and that's kind of what I do now. So like obviously you got that side to you. Do you know where that goes back to? Like, have you always kind of been seeking out that hard, difficult stuff to do, or is it just kind of something recent? What's your story on that?
Well, I've always been somebody who has a need to perform. I've been somebody who, I've got a competitive side and a chip on my shoulder, and I'm the type of person that wants to be the best, and not necessarily the better than everybody else, but as best as I can be at whatever that I'm doing. And something, and again, this goes back to my why, or if I'm not motivated to do something, then I know I'm not going to do well at it. Then I'm not motivated to do it. But doing my airborne definitely unlocked part of that. We had a sergeant that went on to JTF2. We had another sergeant who had come back from Somalia, and so these were hardened dudes, and we were young, and we had to prove ourselves because there was a PPCLI platoon doing their jump course at the same time, and they were all saying, "Oh, the cadets." So we had to show them that, yeah, we might be cadets, but we've trained hard to be here, and we're going to show that we belong here. And to your point, it was finishing a course and walking away through the whole time. You're thinking this is super hard. And then you finish and you get your wings, and you've got the lieutenant colonel up there in your graduation saying you're now part of a special group. And there are two types of people in the world, those who jump and those who do not jump. And you start feeling a certain level of pride. And it ingrained in me what I've even written in my book, which is, if you take the easy path, well, it's not going to be rewarding. No matter what it is. When it's easy, it's just not rewarding. The year after my jump course, I was a staff cadet in a camp, and I was tough. I was tough. I was strict. And my cadets at the end, who hated me all summer, cried because they thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was going to be a memorable summer for them. Where had it been easy and just a walk in the park, they probably just would have walked away thinking, "Oh yeah, that was summer camp, not a cadet course." Yeah. So. Developed that from young, and I've always been looking for it. I can say it escaped me for a while, just getting bored with training and just looking for a reason to train harder. And then that's, again, like I said, that's where the Spartan Races came in, and they are difficult races, and it just pushed me to do something difficult and then train in order to fight easy. Train hard, fight easy. That's one of my lifelong mantras.
I freaking love it, man. That's what I've been using kind of as my business tagline for a little while, is train hard, fight easy. And and we got that drilled into us kind of when we were on pre-deployment training too. Like, take it seriously, because this could be ultimately something that saves your life. And it's just something that I always took really seriously, like as an instructor too. Because I remember going on patrol in Afghanistan, and I didn't really learn any field craft on pre-deployment training. My job when I was deploying wasn't one that was technically that required you to even be in the infantry. But basically, it was an infantry job. Like, we're walking around with the infantry platoons. You got to know your shit. Mm-hmm. And it all went back to covered movement. Not silhouetting yourself on walls and stuff like that. That I learned my first summer with the Grenadiers, and it was all Grenadier instructors, and like a bunch of them had come back from Bosnia, and like there was just a ton of just wisdom there. And when you're working with guys that you're young too, like I was 19, and you were I guess like 15, 16, and you're with these like men, and you're looking at them like, holy shit, these guys are warriors. All you want to do is just impress them, right? At least that's how I felt our time, and I'm sure you felt the same way too. And it's just when you're in that class of warrior, it feels so good. And so when I was doing all that training, I didn't know I was going to Afghanistan. Afghanistan didn't even exist. But I remember I went and I thanked my section commanders when I got back. I was like, guys, I really appreciate all the lessons you taught me, because they kept me alive, man. Like, it wasn't anybody else. Like, I did all my training, and then like I was quickly in leadership, and it was really those lessons that stuck with me. And so the importance of being trained well and taking it seriously And, having, cadet camp not be like, summer camp and like, just having pool parties and eating cookies
Yeah.
all day. Like, you did something for those cadets that I'm sure they still remember, because they weren't there because they wanted to go to camp. They were there because they wanted to join the cadets, and they could have gone to Boy Scouts, but they didn't. So they got exactly what they expected. So that's awesome to hear, man. Like, I'm sure you're able to translate that into your business world as well. So like, you're doing talking tours and stuff like that, and obviously you've been successful in business for quite some time. So how do you think that kind of translates into what you do now on the civvy side or on the business side of things?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even before business, I look at how I am as a father.
Mm.
My kids don't get too many free passes. Just last night, my girls are both in gymnastics, and one of my girls she had a little bit of she gave sass to the coach. So when we were talking about it, and I know that my younger has got a little bit of a chip on her shoulder, so she didn't fall far from the tree, and it's because it got hard that she started having attitude. She's like, oh, but she's telling me to push harder, and so realizing that she's kind of trying to take the easy way out and not happy that her coach is pushing her. I told her, because she wanted to quit. I said, you're not quitting. You're going back and you're finishing this no matter what. So you better like it. And if you don't like it, you might as well get better, because that's the only way it's going to get easier. And, maybe some parents would listen to me and say, oh, you're really mean to your kids. No, that's who I am with them. And I think that in the long run, when I work with kids as well, and I say kids, really, they're young adults who need to get their parents involved when anything happens. I don't want that of my kids. I want them to be responsible adults who will be able to handle their own as much as they can, even though I'll still be there to help them when they need it. So I do that as a father. And then on the business side, again, it's holding myself to a higher standard. If I expect anything from anyone who works with me or for me, I'm going to, display the same or better. And again, I think, this is partly ingrained in me from spending 7 years in the Army Cadets, and at a time when the Army Cadets were very close, in our case anyways, with the Guards. We trained with them, we learned drill with them. So that was ingrained of, you've always got to do your best. You've always got to look your best. You've always got to try your best. And it's the same thing at work. Anybody who's worked for me knows that Steve's a fun manager. He's a fun leader, but he has high expectations, and he's not going to let you slide.
Excellence is the only acceptable standard.
Exactly.
I love that mantra, man. That's stuck. I have that up in my downstairs here. Excellence is the only acceptable standard. It was just like something that's ingrained in us as guards. And like, really, any unit has something relatively similar, right? You want the best out of your troops, and that only makes sense, and it translates well into business as well. But the thing I've noticed, because like I was in, I guess, civvy land, for the last few years. I spent 15 years with the Guards, and the one thing that I found hard to accept was just there's that lack of what you're talking about, like that accountability. Like, no, I need you to kind of do this, and I know you can do better, and I'm going to hold you accountable to it. That's hard to find, and I don't know if that's something you've noticed as well. Just somebody that's a leader that doesn't have to be an asshole. Yeah. I think we confuse like being accountable to somebody and somebody being a good leader with kind of being an asshole and being that guy in like the movies, like in Office. Yeah, you got to stick around and do the TPS reports. Like, that's not it. The individual that can motivate you, but also hold you to account for your excuses and just expect more from you. I think you could probably speak more to that. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, I think, any strong leader, and it's, not just coming from the military, but any strong leader is going to have difficulty when working in, whether it be the corporate world or like you said, the civvy world. The problem with that manager in Office Space is he's asking him to do the cover, but you could tell this guy just walks around with his coffee mug all the time, and he's not putting in the work. He's not showing or setting the example. And I think that's where a lot of leaders lack in the civilian world is, for one, they're not setting the example. And really, you've always got to lead by example. You've got to lead by the front. And that's something I think the military, you get it ingrained in you. Mm-hmm. So you look for that when you're in the civilian world, or you're going to do that. So that's the first thing I think a lot of lot of leaders, they don't lead, they just kind of dictate, but they're not ready to get out in front and do the work. And that's really the big one. And yeah, I think that's the biggest one that's coming to my head right now is, it's not leading by example. There's this kind of, again, it goes with the whole book, is a lot of people will try and take the easy road after and think, oh, I've arrived, I don't need to put in the work. I can remember as a young manager at Domino's Pizza washing dishes and a driver coming in and saying, what are you doing? Why are you washing dishes? I said, because I want us to finish. And he's like, yeah, but that's my job. And I said, no, there are no my jobs here. We all work together as a team. Yeah, exactly. And I've always approached that, my team leadership like that is, you don't work for me. We all work together and we succeed or fail as a team. But a lot of leaders don't take that. They take it as I'm the boss here. Just do what you guys. And so they don't really have a strong ball.
Yeah, and like at the end of the day, that leads to resentment in the team. You can spot the individual who's not the authentic leader or the transformational leader, or just a leader just in general. Like anybody that's able to motivate people and get a job done by bringing together resources is essentially a leader. But it's those leadership styles, right, that I think some people who don't have any formal training don't realize that there's certain ways to go about different situations. And I think that's the greatest thing about having all the Army training, is that we end up being assets in organizations that we go to. And I think it's slowly starting to come to light that we provide a certain value, even if you weren't necessarily, you don't have to be a lieutenant colonel. You don't have to be commanding battle groups. You can be a corporal.
Yep.
You can be a private, and your leadership ability is better than somebody who has like gone up. I don't know. I'm not trying to shit on people that are in corporate world, but it's just, you're not living with guys 24/7 and having to manage their day to day. Like that's not corporate world, so that makes you a whole other level of leader. I mean, like for us, it was ceremonial guard. Like I don't think you ever got to do it, but as a leader, that was one of the best things that I got to do. And I did it for numerous years, because you're literally living with guys for an entire summer, but you're not dealing with a lot of field stuff. You're dealing with the life of an individual. Like they need certain things. They need leave passes. Their freaking mom dies. Like you're like, oh shit. You're like, I don't know what to, and you got to coordinate all these different solutions. And it's just such a good experience for you to figure out yourself. And I cringe at some of the decisions I made when I was young, but I made them already. Yeah. And now I know that in the future I won't make them, because I made that mistake. So it's cool you mentioned. I want to touch on something on your book though. You mentioned like moving forward, people make excuses, and on every step of the way, whether it's usually you're your own worst enemy basically, and you end up making an excuse, and then you end up diverting your attention somewhere else so that you don't have to actually make shit happen. And that's something that I'll compare it to a jogger who he's like, they're all lies. And it's just, it's sunk in because you've heard it, right? It's like, they're all lies.
Yeah, I heard it. Lie.
Lie.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have enough money?
Yeah.
Lie. You don't have enough time? Lie. And it just, that really stuck out for me, that, you're making excuses, and everybody makes an excuse for not acting on their dreams, and then they have those regrets. And it's awesome that you mentioned Gary Vee on that too. He hung out with elderly people for a while and just took in what they were saying. They all regretted something. So do you have a way that, because we all experience it, right, where it's like, I got an idea, I should work on this, I should get this done, and then you're like, do you have a protocol, or do you have a process that kind of gets your mind moving forward so you take that first step?
Writing shit down. I mean, you got to write it down, you got to commit to it in writing. I also share with the people who are my supporters, because you're going to have those people who are around you, but they're your negative Nancy's. They're the ones that like to hear your plans, so they can just use it as a reason to hopefully get you to fail, and then they can feel better about themselves. So, and they can be people who really care for you. And they that's who they are. But I write my targets down, and then I share it. I share it with my wife. I let my kids know, and I let some of my closer friends know, because if you write it down and you keep it to yourself, well, you'll still have your excuses. And at some point you got to man up, and this is man up in a very general term. It's for men or women, but you gotta look at yourself and, okay, I wrote this down. Why am I not doing it? And to the point, I just say bullshit as opposed to lies. This is your excuse. And you start by selling yourself that excuse. And then when you've told other people your target and they say, hey, how's it going? How's your book doing? When I told people I was writing, and I didn't tell a lot of people, and they'd say, how's your book going? Imagine if I would have said, oh yeah, I stopped writing it because bullshit. There is no because. The because is I gave up. I quit. I didn't do it. So that's where I think the key is you need a good supporting team, and you got to write your stuff down. And in the end, you've then got to be accountable to yourself. I talk about in the book about what would you do if you brought your clothes to the dry cleaner and it was constantly not pressed properly, your shirts weren't pressed properly, or if your landscaper didn't cut your grass properly. How many weeks would pass? Yeah, how many weeks would pass that you would pay them and not say anything? But why are you doing it to yourself? Why are you doing it on your goals, your targets, and then you're saying, well, you know what, I really didn't want to do it, or whatever. No, if you get down to your real why, and you believe that you can, because that's the second step. You actually have to believe that you can do this. If you've got those two and then you don't do it, well, you got to look yourself in the mirror and call yourself out on it.
Yeah, roger that, man. Yeah, I know for me, writing down has been huge. Like it's amazing how much of a mind shift just putting your thoughts down on paper has. And it's, it's been an ongoing process. And I've also been voice recording things. Like when I have an idea, I a lot of times I don't necessarily act out on it, but now it's like it's out in the universe rather than in your head.
Exactly.
And it's so weird how that actually starts to manifest itself. Like I hadn't really ever considered writing a book, but I ended up doing a course in Spain with a bunch of remote fit pro guys. So they work on entrepreneurs getting their remote fitness business up and running. Mm-hmm. And just one of the guys that was there, his name's Ben Coomer. He's like, you need to write a book. And I looked at him like, okay, on what? He's like, your story, dude. He's like, start writing. He's like, you have a good story. You should be writing. He's like, I don't have nearly as good enough story. He's like, I've written 6 books. He's like, I'm not even that good of a writer. You know? So I was like, okay, cool. I guess. He's like, no, you need to do it. He's like, when are you going to start? I was like, I don't know. I've got a few things on the go. Like I want to, he's like, no. He's like, now, like start literally writing today. And I started just with a blog post, to be honest. I started blogging and that was kind of my way in. And I realized I enjoy writing, and then things kind of just start taking shape. And it's just so impressive how you can shape your reality, shape your life just based on putting things down on paper and just taking one step. And I liken it to another example I got, like, I'm putting a business together. It's not easy, right? And like writing a book is not easy. And it's like putting together the iPhone 1. Like when the iPhone 1 came out, it was kind of shitty, but it was still the iPhone. And every iteration has been better and better and better. But had Steve Jobs been like, I don't know, it's not perfect yet, I'm not going to release it, well, we wouldn't have the 10, which is incredible.
Right.
And it just goes to show, you need to go out there and actually do something. And rather than worry about, it's not perfect yet. Yeah, but it's never going to be perfect if you just keep it in your head.
Well, and that's also one of the points that I mentioned. One of the principles of success is you never settle. So to your point, don't get into perfection paralysis where you're just, I started a business with partners years ago, and I remember they were always like, no, we're not ready to start. We're not ready. And I'm like, guys, it's taking a long time. If we're going to run out of funds before we start at this point, we need to get started and then continue to improve. We'll put in the work. And then we don't settle. Once we're working, the whole point is to attain a certain level. And once we've got there, okay, how do we improve on that? How do we improve on it? It's the same thing. Again, I go back to training, but if you're exercising, you say, wow, I can run a kilometer in 5 minutes, and then what? Or if you're in sales, well, everybody knows, well, you're only as good as your last sale. And that better have been yesterday, because today, what did you sell? So it's don't settle. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep pushing. So same thing, like you said, with your goals, a lot of people set goals mentally. They think about, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. Great. That's a good first start. Now write it down. Now really commit to it. And once you've written it down for yourself, we'll share it. That's another level of commitment now, because you're now accountable not only to yourself, but those who you're sharing it with. And it's got to be somebody who you care about, who cares about you, and you care about their opinion. And hopefully, like I said, it's not somebody who's a negative Nancy and is gonna just fill you with doubt and fear.
That's the worst, eh? Because you know
Yeah.
what? And like you said, even the people that truly care about you, it's because I'm starting to understand it a little bit better. That they do care about you, and that's why they don't want you to go out on a limb, because there's this like this part of your brain where it's like, ooh, if you do something out of the box, it might end up in death. But realistically, we don't have the same threats that we did 2 years ago.
Right. Well, I mean, in your world, in the Army, obviously that is a real threat. But to your point, people fear failure as if it is death, or fear mistakes. Yes. In the corporate world, it's mistakes, right? Oh, they made a mistake. Great. Let's be solution oriented, not problem oriented. They made a mistake. That means they tried. Let's fix it so that it doesn't happen again.
Right.
Well, same thing. People are afraid, oh, but if you try and start your business, you may fail. You'll give up on a job and you may fail. Okay. But failure is a setback, and a setback's just a setup for a comeback. So let's come on. Let's go for this. And if I fail, my job then is to learn from my failure and make sure it doesn't happen again. It's that fear of failure that they have for you, and it's equivalent to many of them as death. Oh, if you fail, how do you come back from it? Well, if it's just a financial failure, there's always a comeback.
Right, exactly. I like what you said there. A setback, just a setup for a comeback. Like I think most people, and I say most people, I had that fear of financial loss. I had a job, I had benefits, I wasn't happy, and it just started playing on me. I'm like, well, am I still going to be able to do this in 20 years for a little bit more pay? Is it really worth it? But if I go out, I'm not going to be making money for, I don't know how many months. I don't know. Yeah. And so that was like, oh, I got a family, I got a mortgage, I got a car. Yeah. What do I do in the meantime? But it was actually Tim Ferriss. I'm sure you've read his stuff. Mm-hmm. So I read his book, and I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And those two books just like mind blown. And it just opened up just the possibility. He said, write down your worst case scenario. And so that's what I did. I said, worst case scenario, I don't make, X amount of dollars because, I'm not working for, X amount of time. Okay, what do you have to do? Well, worst case scenario is that I literally just have to go back to teaching, and I could find a job. I have my degrees. I have experience. I have education. I would just go back to something that I'm not really passionate about anymore. Yeah. If that's my worst case scenario, then, you know what I mean? Like, we would lose a little bit of, we wouldn't be able to be padding our nest egg, but it would be a few months out of, my 45 more years, hopefully, on this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Yeah. And so it really reset my mindset, and I didn't want to have regrets, and I didn't want to be average. And I think that's my guiding principles. I just don't want to be average. And for me, average was what I was doing. I was going to work and doing what I felt I had to do and taking care of my family. And
you're stuck in that comfort zone.
Stuck in the comfort zone, and I just felt there was something more. And I'm glad I did it, because I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I can guarantee you that. I wouldn't have written a book. I can guarantee you that.
Exactly.
So just those two things alone have enriched my life. And anybody that's considering it, there's all kinds of reasons not to, but the most important thing, like you said, like, you're going to probably fail. Accept it, but accept it as like, that's good. Like Jocko Willink, he's like, you failed, good. It's just a time to come back, and everything is a learning experience. There's no such thing as failure. So that's, I think, for your book, just for people out there that want to get a book that really has it broken down into the most salient points, and you just need that inspiration. Like, Steve, your book's been freaking awesome. It's a really quick read, and it just boils down everything that took me maybe like 6, 7, 8 months to kind of cobble all things together. Steve, you put it all in one book. If I had this book like 6 months ago, it would have saved me like 6 months of research and like soul searching. It would have just been like, oh, okay, cool, I got it all. Let's go. So, Steve, I want to ask you a few final questions with the big three. So the big three, we finished off the podcast just with just some questions that kind of make you more multi-dimensional for our listeners. So the first one I'm going to start with is basically, it's a hard one, I know. Who's been inspiring you recently, or who is your inspiration, or what inspires you as a whole to do what you do?
Yeah, it's hard to drill it down to three. You've mentioned, Jocko Willink. He's somebody that I've followed sparingly. Joe Rogan, you've mentioned. I like following his podcast. He's got a lot of good points and life principles and philosophies. Yeah. So there's so many out there. Les Brown, and I mean, I'm often on YouTube watching the motivational videos. So it's really hard to boil it down to three, because I like to be a sponge, and I find that, now I'm finding myself quoting Seneca a lot, and
the Stoic.
Yeah, well,
love it.
And I've just ordered the Daily Stoic, so I can have it. And reading 2 other books.
We're gonna have to put that in the show notes. We'll have to put that in the show notes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it's really hard to drill it down. When I think about, one of the biggest influencers in my life, obviously my dad, who came here with no education. He came here, his hand being crushed on a boat, and he was left behind in a hospital. Yet he raised a family, bought a triplex here in Montreal, and did very well for himself. But he was also an influence because I saw him work 7 days a week, and towards the end mentioned how he wasn't happy with, he was here and he should have been in Greece during the Olympics to go and see his country. There were those things too that were also a huge inspiration for what I want to teach my kids and show them how, money is good. And, my dad did it because he needed to support the family, but we have a better opportunity having education and being born in this great country. Let's use it not to just work and make money and then not live a life where we can enjoy that. So I think that's my dad, big influence. And another one is really interesting. When I was young, I was a big troublemaker. And when I started in cadets, I still have a big mouth, but it was a wild and untamed big mouth. And I had a captain, an Army cadet captain, who was like a mentor, and he stayed with me throughout my cadet career and really taught me a lot of the important things so that I can settle down and use my energy in the right direction, which is what I try and do with my own kids. Those are the 2 biggest influencers overall. But like I said, reading all the books and meeting you and hearing your story and seeing that you're trying to live your dream versus just trying to follow the comfort and the easy path. That's inspiration, because the easy path is easy. It's what everybody does. But those who really are happy with their lives are the people who get off that easy path and go after what they really want. Not so much because of what they achieve in the end, but like you mentioned, it's that work and that sacrifice and that going for their goal that they end up loving.
Yeah, hands down. I mean, the difference for me was I get to spend a lot more time with my family.
Yeah.
And even though I'm putting in a ton more work, I don't mind. I get up in the morning, I'm like, nice. Yeah. I got this to do, but it's so much more enjoyable. And, the money will eventually be there. And I see the momentum's building, and this podcast, is going to be one of those things that is going to allow me to meet more people like yourself, that it's a snowball effect. And I can't stress it enough. Like I just had this conversation with my wife, like we don't realize that we have access to kind of as much capital as we want. So when it comes to like starting a business, right? Like I could go to the bank tomorrow and ask for a $10,000 line of credit if I wanted. They'd be like, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we don't realize like you can't do that in other parts of the world. You can't just go ask for $10,000. So when people come here and they realize, wait, I can get access to that cash too. That's why they start depreneurs. That's why they start their businesses. And they build, and they're like, everything I do is for me and my family. And that's so powerful. Like now, if I don't sell, I'm not making money for my family. And although a salary kind of does the same thing, it doesn't feel the same. And I'm sure you can attest to that too. It doesn't feel the same. Like somebody's paying you and it's like, yeah, I'm doing this because this is just what I do. And some people that's fine. But for me and for guys like you, obviously that's not the case.
No. And a lot of people say, oh, entrepreneurial, that's the only path. It comes down to some people can't handle the risk. They don't have that risk tolerance. They don't, or they're working in their passion already. And so
yeah, right.
if you've got that life where you're doing that and you're happy and you're not just about your work, that's the one thing. You can't be one dimensional. Success is not one dimensional. It's multi-dimensional. So yes, you're making a good living, and there's no value on that. Good living is really, it's contingent to your situation and your needs. So you're making a good living. You're with those who you love. You're investing time with them, and you're doing things that you love. That's, to me, my definition of success. And I think often, just really quick, people like to define success as the balance in their bank account.
Yeah.
But then they end up, they climb that ladder of success only to realize it's been leaning on the wrong wall, and it's too late.
Yeah, that was early on in your book. That was kind of the part that stuck with me. Is like, you have your ladder on the wrong wall. It's like, whoa, that's a really good analogy. And when you get to the end of that ladder, for me, it was when I was working, it's like, okay, the end of the ladder is retirement. I didn't want my ladder on that wall.
Exactly.
I don't even consider retirement a thing for me. I want to keep on being productive. It's weird, eh? We have this system kind of built that's like, oh, you're going to live your life when you're 65.
Yeah, it's retarded.
I don't want to live my life when I'm 65. I want to live my life now. That's why in my 20s, like, I went on trips and stuff. Like, I didn't really have the cash, but I kind of made my mind up at that point. And then once I started working, I was like, wait, I'm not following what I was following in my 20s. And it was weird. I had that shift. It was like, oh, I got to settle down. I got to have a wife, kids, stuff like that. And like, obviously it's been the best part of my life, but I didn't have to decide that, oh, I'm just going to work for retirement. So yeah, I think that ladder analogy is huge. And just to touch on the fact, like, entrepreneurs, like, we've gone out and kind of done our own thing, but yeah, you're right. Not everybody's going to be entrepreneurial, but going and fulfilling your dreams doesn't mean you have to go start your own business, but it could mean, write a book while you work at your job, or start a podcast, or, do something that everybody has an idea that they've always wanted to put into. I don't know anybody that's been like, no, I don't really have anything I want to. Everybody's like making cupcakes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's just take that step, do it. Just freaking do it.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a business. It doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be another job. It could be, you've always wanted to. I have a friend who's about to run his first 10K. He's always been a big guy, and he's lost a bunch of weight, and he's taking his health really seriously and exercising. And he's like, Steve, I'm about to do my first 10K. He goes, and my goal is to do it within the hour. And I find that's phenomenal, because he's really happy in the work that he does. So for him, changing job or starting a company doesn't make sense. He's really good where he is. He's got a personal goal that he's working towards and he's sacrificing for. This is a guy who loves to eat, and I mean, he still eats, but he's decided, he gave up meat for a while because he's like, my cholesterol's high and I don't want to take medication. So he's sacrificed in order to attain the goal that he's always wanted, but hasn't been able to because of his health, and he's made it now a priority. And I think, when you talk about living your whole life and so on, a recent quote is the memento mori. And I may be saying it wrong, but it's remember death. And I think Steve Jobs said it, and a lot of people talk about, when we think you're going to live forever, you waste your time on things that you wouldn't if you remembered that our life here is really, really short. And when you live with that, life is short but long at the same time, you do certain things or you don't do certain things because you don't want to waste that time. Yeah. Like waiting to 65 to live.
Waiting till you're 65 and then you have a heart attack. Yeah. I with my family's history of heart failure, it's something that's always been in the back of my mind, just to go, like, now we're on the morbid side of things. But I've always struggled with that whole idea of like retiring when I'm 65, but having that goal has been something. And that struggle, I think if more people kind of undertook that struggle and that self-imposed struggle and be like, I'm going to better myself, I think we'd have we already have it pretty good here. But I think it would make our community stronger, I think, because you'd have this kind of self-sacrifice. And I think I don't want to get too much down this rabbit hole, but being a teacher, I think that's where some of the students and some of the anxiety and stuff. I think that's where it comes from. I think it's,
Mhm.
yeah, school's hard, but there's more to it. I think it's the day-to-day is too easy. And that's just
Yes.
my soldier perspective. Like, it's really easy. I mean, most of them don't have to walk to school. Most of them don't have to do anything
Yep.
other than just exist and show up and get grades. And I think that they don't realize it, but it's not hard enough for them. And we seek
Yep.
out hard shit all the time. We're a species
Yeah.
that thrives in difficult conditions, and that's why we are where we are. And I think that's kind of, I'm not an expert, but I just that anxiety and like, I can't write a test, I'm too stressed out. I'm like, I just, it was getting to the point where it's just more and more and more and more. And I think it plays into that lack of struggle just on a micro level that we're removing, because I think it comes from a good place. It's like, my parents didn't have it nearly as easy as I did. My grandparents definitely didn't. My grandmother from Ireland had nothing. And now it's like, I want my kids to always be better and better and better. But now it's gotten so easy that you just create these worlds of stress that are artificial. So
and I'm sure I touched on that when I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the book.
Right.
And we don't worry about, in our country anyway, we don't worry about our safety needs. We don't worry about our physiological needs like food and shelter. Most of us have those. So then we get into the higher needs, and that's where things are too easy. And I think to a certain extent, our brain kind of starts saying, "I'm bored here, and I'm not or I'm not capable of handling the stress or the pressure because I've never had to." And so when I look at my kids, I say, the plane takes off against resistance. So I'm not going to make life easy for you because it's a lot harder out there. But I think, and it's not just parents with their kids, but in general, we're looking for that easy path. And when we finally hit that obstacle, we just don't know how to handle it. And so training hard makes the fight easy.
Yeah. I think you got that bang on. That the analogy of the plane can only take off with wind resistance is a really good analogy. And it comes down to, like I was saying at the start of the podcast, that HORMESIS kind of practice where a little bit of stress does the body good. And I've been watching guys that are like CrossFit athletes and stuff like that immerse themselves in like tanks full of ice water, and there's evidence to show that it's actually beneficial, and we don't have the same kind of stress, like I do intermittent fasting. I stress my body out a little bit just to elicit a little bit of fat loss, and I feel my head's a bit clearer, so all these little things I think really, really help, because like you said, I don't have to worry about food. I don't have to worry about shelter. It's my safety. Like, I'm not worried about, like, the most stressful thing I do safety wise is driving down the street. And even at that, like, I got a SUV, like, I got airbags, so yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I think your book taps into the ability for people to realize that the stressors that we used to have, they're no longer there. So you can go ahead and live out that dream, because at the end of the day, it's a financial stress, I think, that kind of holds people back. And then in the back of their minds, they have that old stress, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to survive. So I think that your book will help those people that are just looking for that little bit of inspiration forward. So the next question I want to ask you is just, what are you listening to, man? Like, obviously you're an author, and you've got a lot of ideas going through your head, and I'm sure you're inspired, and you read and you listen to podcasts and whatever it may be. So, what would be your recommendation, or what are you reading right now to pass on to our listeners?
Well, I just read a book called The Good Shepherd. It's a really easy read. It's about leadership, and it's as you read through it, there are things that I was reading and saying, oh, I do this, and I think I do this with my teams, but it's still a good easy read, and it puts clear display or clear explanation of how we should be leading our teams fairly to get the best out of them. Recently finished, and this was a good book. It's a harder read, but it's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a really good book, and it Viktor Frankl was a prisoner in the concentration camps in World War II, and he survived. And it's about why people survive. And in his book, he talks about how suffering is necessary in life, and that we've done too much of a good job eliminating suffering or hiding our suffering. And it's funny because this book was written decades ago, but you look at social media and people only post the good. But if people admitted that they had some suffering, and maybe not publicly, but to themselves, that they were going through some suffering, they can actually recover from it a little better. But when we always try and hide our suffering and always try and paint the good picture, we miss the learning possibility from having some difficult times in our life. And then and the other books are more technical. Circle of Profit from Anik Singhal. It's about internet marketing, and so that's what I've just finished. And now I'm looking forward to reading. I'm talking with a friend, and he suggested Obstacle is the Way, which totally sounds up my alley. Ego is the Enemy is another one that's on its way. I just ordered from Amazon. And then finally the Daily Stoic is the other one that I'm waiting for.
Yeah, so clearly you've got a very extensive reading list here. I'm not surprised. You probably have a few more, but these are just the ones that are on your mind right now. Yeah, we'll definitely have to get those in the show notes so people can go find them on Amazon. And we'll definitely have to put your book there as well. And so lastly, before we wrap up, just the last final question is always, what makes you hard to kill?
Can you say that again?
Yeah. So the last question is always, what makes you hard to kill?
What makes me hard to kill? And you'll have to forgive me for the sound. My phone was about to die, so I needed to plug in. It's not making my phone hard to kill, though. For one, I train 4 to 5 times a week. High intensity training. I do CrossFit, but even when I'm not doing CrossFit, I'll do HIIT workouts, boot camps. I'm always looking to be in my top physical shape and to be in better physical shape than the person next to me. So that's the first thing. Reading. I read a lot and I learn a lot, and I'm always trying to learn and grow. And that's another thing that if you're always one up on your enemy, it's hard for them to kill you. And I think the other thing is just passionately curious. I try and remain passionately curious, always want to learn, always want to try new things. It's hard not to get stuck in the routine, but if you're passionately curious, if you're always looking for new experiences and new learnings, you kind of force yourself out of that routine, out of that comfort zone, and into new experiences and new learning.
Very solid, very solid. You know what? The fitness aspect of things, I totally identify with that. And for me, I heard Joe Rogan talk about this too, and I was like, oh, thank God there's somebody else that thinks this way. When I'm training and I'm going hard, I'm like, if my family needs me, I need to do one more set. I need to do one more rep, and like, it's that survival thing. And he says the same thing too. He's like, he just gets angry. He's like, he thinks about people murdering his family. I'm like, I don't think about people murdering my family. I think about, like, if I need to go and, they're a mile away, but I need to go pull them out. Like, there's a tsunami coming. I need to go get them out of there. Like, I need to be able to do that. So I have that in the back of my mind. And so that hard training, that HIIT training is so important for that. Like, it gives you that confidence, right? So that's really
but I think Joe Rogan, he touches because I've discussed it with a few friends. You've got to have this I don't know what the mentality is. We always called it the worst case scenario mentality, where I sometimes in the middle of the summer go out in my pool and I will wade in the water or skim water, basically just staying there floating for an hour. Because I'm like, well, if ever anything happened and I needed to float in the water for an hour, I will have.
We're too similar, man. We're too similar, man. We definitely need to get together and do some Spartan training together. Because
absolutely,
I think we're going to push each other to new limits, man. That's I think that's a guarantee.
Yeah, and I think you bring up another point is always find people I would want to train with you because I'm sure you push me a lot harder than training with somebody else or training by myself. And it's finding those people who can train with you or learn with you, and especially if they're better than you, do that, because that's how you'll continue to grow. And that's again, going with the passionately curious. People will want to avoid, and if you're a weaker person, you want to avoid those who are stronger than you because you're afraid that they may make you look bad.
Right.
But if you're strong and you're determined and you're on your own path, you're not afraid to stand next to someone and say, yeah, this person's better than me and I'm growing because of this person. And I find that's an integral part of the passionately curious.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole idea of being self-conscious, if you can get over that and put your ego aside and go train with that beast that's at the gym, that's just crushing it. Just like anything too, you go and you study with the individual that's significantly smarter than you. Like I like feeling like I'm the dumbest guy in the room, because I'm like, I'm going to learn a shit ton here. It's just one of those attitudes. You're never going to be the best at anything, so you might as well sit there and learn and improve yourself.
Yeah.
Steve, this has been freaking awesome. I really thank you for showing up on the podcast. I think the listeners are going to get a ton of value from not only your book, but what you have to say. So before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts, or what do you got on your mind right now?
Well, I mean, thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun. Partly the reason why this book came about was because this is the kind of conversation that I love having, talking about how people can do better, and getting with like-minded people and talking about how they do better, like yourself. I think, like I said, the quote of memento mori, or remember death, that's not the biggest why, like I said, that we should have to go after our dreams and our goals. I'm not sure what else can get somebody to get up and go do what they need to do, or what they want to do. So that would be my last point.
Excellent words of wisdom, brother. Appreciate you coming on. Now it's time I haven't eaten yet today, so I'm going to go crush an Indian buffet. They're waiting for me, man. So yeah, I'm going to let you go. Yeah. So and good luck with your training, and we definitely got to get together and do some Spartan WODs before Spartan season comes up.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Dave.
All right, thanks, buddy. Cheers.
All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find out more about training, nutrition, and mindset at davemorrow.net. Be sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram at DaveMorrowPT. And don't forget, strong people are hard to kill.